Professor Ahmed Mamudu to help create perspectives for this discussion this morning on the program. Thank you for we appreciate it. Basically, you know, when you look at this very, some people would say, topical issue of the Ruga settlement as is being proposed by the federal government, it has a historical perspective. What are your thoughts? Last couple of days, for instance.
Try and get a historical, like you said, perspective of the whole issue. Cattle settlements are not new to Nigeria. In fact, they are older than pastoral herding. The earliest cattle settlement, I think, was in a cattle ranch in the 1950s. And then there was another one somewhere in Ondo, and then in Mokwa in Niger State. So these are the trails where they would normally pass in transportation or the rail lines. And the advantage that these settlements had was that they could sort of quarantine the animals, provide a standard of care, veterinary services, etc., etc. And so with the advent of the military rule, like most other things that happened to the country, a lot of these settlements kind of dispersed. The ease to access became more difficult as transportation now started relying mostly on road network instead of the rail network as well as the other means of transportation. And so the whole thing now dispersed. So what the government is trying to do now is to return to that kind of situation, because you have these clashes where people are roaming on other people's land, and there is not adequate security to ensure we keep to, there's a distance between the people who are feeding their cattle and the owners of the land. So what do? You ranch. What is Ruga? Ruga is simply rural grazing areas. And this is a system that has been tried in other climes and it worked successfully. We've had a situation where you restrict these animals to a particular area, and then you provide all the services that are required to keep the animals healthy, to feed them, and then you create a value chain also. Because when you talk about a ranch, you are talking about a complete value chain. You are talking about hides and skin, you are talking about milk, you are talking about yogurt, you are talking about food processing, you are talking about a tannery. So even people who are interested in that value chain have already indicated interest, and they said, look, we are interested in what you are proposing because we know that you are going to add value. For example, the Italians are already interested. You know what Italy and leather is like. You are talking about a tannery that is going to generate its own income. We're talking about standardization of the milk, the poultry, and let's be clear on what we are saying. We are not talking about only cows. We're talking about animal husbandry here. So we're talking about cows, we're talking about goats, we're talking about pigs, we're talking about poultry. So it's going to be like a whole settlement. And what the federal government is saying is, if you are interested in this, indicate your interest. So I don't see what all of the noise is about, because the federal government does not own land. The land is owned by the state government, and whoever is interested will be asked to apply through the Ministry of Agriculture.
But I think what bothers a lot of Nigerians that I've heard talk about this issue in the course of the week is the fact that, first of all, Nigeria is, for want of better words, polarized.
Yes.
Culturally and so on and so forth, of course, across the lines of religion and ethnicity. Because when you talk about other climes where this same arrangement has worked, you're looking at the peculiarity of those environments vis-a-vis what you have back at home here. And then you mentioned the issue of the fact that at the point these herdsmen and their cattle had to disperse. That dispersal essentially has led us to where we are today, hasn't it?
Right, that's correct. So what the dispersal has caused a problem.
Yes.
And as with most things in the country, we are trying to go back to what worked best for us. And the history of ranching worked best for us, because you will now be able to contain these men, you will now know that if we find herdsmen outside the ranch areas, then they are looking for trouble. Then these are definitely troublemakers. These are people with a bad intention. Because if, for example, there's a ranch in Edo State here, you expect that you will find at least in that area. But then when you find them maybe 200 kilometers away from there, you know that you are talking about somebody who is definitely up to no good. So besides localization of the industry, it now allows you to adequately secure the place. So that when people now raise alarm that we saw herdsmen 200 kilometers from the ranch, it will now be easy to mobilize people, security forces there, and say, what is going on in this area? So these are some of the things that we need to consider. And there is also the correct, let me say, fear that people are harboring about, should we call it colonization? But it's a misplaced fear, because the steps that are to be taken before these ranches are established are very clear and laid out. The first of them is that there must be cooperatives. These ranchers, let us bear in mind, let me go back a little bit. The people that suffer probably the most from the miscreants who are now tagged as Fulani herdsmen are the owners of cattle themselves. Because a lot of people down south do not understand that a cow is a commodity that can easily be disposed of. So when you have rustlers, they are called rustlers,
right,
they just come into a place. You might have people who their whole life depends on 20 cows, and the rustlers come and take 5 of those cows. You have to understand that a cow is cash.
Right.
You can take a cow to the market right now. If it is normally sold for 200,000 and you offer 150, in 20 minutes that cow will be butchered and it will be sold. So imagine where somebody loses 20 cows. It works both ways. It's not only the settlements that will benefit from it, the herdsmen will also benefit from it. They will have security, the communities will have security, and everybody knows where to find these people.
But again, there's the fear of these settlements becoming such that at some point there is a fight as to who owns the land. People are looking at 20, 30, 40, 50 years down the line. Those are serious ramifications, aren't they?
Yes, they are very serious ramifications. But like I said earlier, the land belongs to the state government. It's only the state government that has the right to enter into agreements for this purpose. It's only the state government that can issue titles for these lands. And they will give you the conditions and the requirements you have to meet before they will give you the land. So for example, they can say they have an occupancy for 50 years, after which they will now review the terms, and then they will decide if they want to continue along that path or not. But we have to understand, most essentially, that it is not restricted to just cows. It is not restricted to just Fulanis. The idea that it's only Fulanis that that are into that business is entirely misplaced. You will have a value chain. For example, if you're talking about food processing, is it only the Fulanis that are going to process food, or the dairy products? What of the poultries? What of the piggery? How about the animal husbandry? And then you have fisheries. You have other associated industries that come under the ranching setup, and they have to be looked into and given the right understanding. There is a lot of misconception, and I don't believe that the government is doing enough to educate people as to the benefits of the proposal.
Incidentally, this morning, talking of government now, the federal government is saying that the issue of states making lands available for this purpose is absolutely voluntary. But then again, of course, you have states, particularly Benin now, saying that they are not in support of this initiative of the federal government. And then it rings a bell somewhere in our heads, asking the question of, is this the only initiative we can embark on in terms of fighting off or warding off crisis between farmers and herdsmen? And then, of course, you have those who are into banditry now, in the name of being the so-called Fulani herdsmen.
Exactly.
So can't we have an all-embracing solution to this problem beyond the proposed Ruga?
Well, the government launched this as a pilot scheme because they understood from the initial resistance against the cattle ranches that were proposed that the states would be reluctant, like you rightly pointed out, to give out land for the purpose. So what the government said is, okay, let us reverse it. Instead of saying we are going to get land, let the states that are interested come and apply for the land. And so 12 states that are interested, because they are the ones that are bearing the brunt of it right now. The clashes, the loss of income, the rustlers, those states now said, we are interested, we have land, we are able to provide you land in such and such places and locations, and then we will partake in the pilot scheme. This is supposed to be a pilot scheme. This only involves the states that voluntarily came out and said they want to be part of the project. So at this point in time, it is entirely voluntary. Nobody is asking Benue State to participate if they are not interested. In fact, the federal government has come out and said, we have more than sufficient states, 12, to launch the pilot scheme. And then when other states see the benefits, they can jump right in. So there's no compulsion, it's entirely voluntary.
But then again, I'm concerned about what do we say to people who push the argument that cattle rearing is first off an individual business. So why is the government so enthusiastic about it at this point, and to what end?
If we take a narrow view, we end up cutting out the larger picture. Let us look at the larger picture. For example, federal government has already embarked on the school feeding program. Right.
Which of course has become controversial too. But I guess that's a discussion for another day.
It's an entirely different discussion. Right. But let us understand that if the intent is good, it has to be fed somehow. Okay. If we say we want our children to be nourished better so that they can study better, that nourishment has to come from somewhere. Everybody eats meat. Nigeria is a large meat-eating population. Right. Where is the meat going to come from? We have to find a way that allows us to live together harmoniously. And these are conversations that we have to keep on having. We have to educate each other and allow each other understand what our differences are and build on those differences, but allow ourselves to come together. Because at the end of the day, how do we provide nutrition if you are not eating properly?
Let's look at some of the challenges we keep having as a country. A lot of people I talk to, whether it's economic, political, or even social, would always make reference to this so-called policy somersault culture that we have in this country. Now, this initiative, as beautiful as some people, because obviously not everybody agrees with it, may see it to be, sustenance is always a problem, isn't it?
Well, to the extent that there is value added to the policy, we have to hope that that value will create its own value chain that will now let it become self-sustaining. Because if we are talking about only cattle, for example, it may become a problem. But if you allow other livestock to be introduced, fisheries, poultry, etc., and it's building on that, then we might see it not only expand, but allow other people to take it as an ongoing interest that they
Essentially, I'm just going to bump in on you briefly so we can bring in at least one more guest to help expand the scope of this conversation on the program this morning. We're right back in a moment. Stay with me.
TMI, every opinion counts.
Thank you for staying with us. We've just been joined by Malam Nuruddin Asunogie, is a lawyer and an Islamic scholar. Thank you for coming on the program.
Thank you for having me. Good morning, viewers.
Just before you got in on set, I was talking with Ahmed here, and we're looking at this Ruga issue and all of the controversies that have trailed it so far. And of course, we don't believe those controversies will dampen so soon, because some persons have made an allusion to what they call political undertone in this conversation. What are your sentiments?
Well, it is unfortunate that today we are being suffocated by this ambience of mistrust. So much so that regardless of how well intentioned one is, whatever you do, motives that are negative will be read into it. this mistrust is incrementally becoming a culture. And I think the sooner we activate or raise conversation around some of those issues that will help precipitate the deracination of this culture, because it's a very untoward one, if not addressed and timely too, we are most likely going to cascade. It is much better that does not happen. There is absolutely nothing new about Ruga. It's just a change of name. If you say Allah and another person says Chineke or Ogene and all that, if they are referring to one and the same being, what is the polemics about? But here we are ready to throw away the water because it is dirty together with the baby. And we say that's not good enough. That's not good enough. Yes, somebody has to lead. Where that individual comes from, for me, becomes immaterial. Differently put, Ruga could be referred to as ranch. We had always had ranch. Before independence, we had ranch. The one that people today still struggle to go to the Obudu, cattle, whatever ranch. It was established in the early 50s, maybe 1950 or 1951. There were ranches everywhere. In the old Midwest, we had one in Igara, in Akoko-Edo. People didn't raise issues. Now, but what is the overall intendment for those who say we do this? There are issues. When Nuruddin, an Afema man, goes to steal, he's dropped in the costume of a Fulani man. So it's the Fulani man who has stolen. Because you are unable to unmark Nuruddin, so it is the Fulani man who has stolen. That's not to say one is going bail for them. The bulk of the crisis we have today are precipitated by this individual. We don't dispute that. So if government, for example, now says there is this culture of denial on the part of those who are supposed to superintend the affairs of the Fulani cattle herders, something happens. Your men were responsible. No, our men, the Meitiala will say, no, our men are peace-loving people who are trying to grow the economy of the system. So it becomes difficult for us to isolate the criminals, the shaft from the grains. And so someone says, fine, enough of all of this. What we now intend to do is put you in a place that is identifiable, a place that gives you an identity, where you will begin to do your business. Do not again forget that when I hear people say, no, we will not do X, Y, Z, we will not going to allow these people, I say, fine. When you say you will not allow them, you say you won't allow them, but they are there precipitating crisis. How have you been able to address that? In a number of communities today, including in Fulani-dominated areas in the north, people don't go to farm anymore. Do not forget that the governor of Katsina State is a Fulani man. There was this outcry from that governor saying, my people can't go to farm again. That in itself is a serious challenge to the issue of food security. So these fellows, whether you regard them as nuisance or whatever, they have their own value. How do we convert this nuisance into a value that becomes useful, assuming they were? And so someone comes with the idea of, let us do this. State government, let's key into this. States like Imo, for example, has the governor of Imo has openly said, we are not going to allow this to happen. Some persons have argued that when that does happen, it will amount to the colonization of that whatever. And I said, how is that going to happen? If you go to Lagos, for example, the Alaba market is in Lagos, a Yoruba land, is dominated by the Igbos. It is dominated by the Igbos. If everyone were asked to go home, Erisco Food operates in the north, and it is in the volume of billions of dollars. if everybody were, that of course will be done in infraction of the provisions of the Constitution that allows for free movement for persons who are citizens. But government has a responsibility to regulate the conduct of people.
I'm going to interrupt you so you can push this narrative a bit further. Incidentally, you mentioned the Métis ally a while ago.
Yeah.
As it turns out, again, this discussion we're having right now has a trail to it. Trail in the sense that in the course of 2018, for instance, on several occasions, the Métis ally came up and spoke very tough about many of these issues, and that unnerved many Nigerians. How do we situate, as it were, the position of the Métis ally in all of this conversation we have?
Now, when you say they talked tough, can I be reminded of what they
talked
said?
Tough in the sense that they threatened that they were going to be at loggerheads with people who resisted herdsmen, members of the Métis ally, as we know it. And some persons said that was a bit of an extreme position.
No, you see, for example, you walk here. If I were going to put obstacles, perceived obstacle by you on your way, you are not likely going to fold your hands and allow that to happen. You will resist me. So do not again forget that you again will need to have a sociological understanding of the profession or trade these persons are into. That trade in itself, the sociologist will tell you, generates what you refer to as the culture of honor. The average herdsman has the totality of his life revolving around his object of trade.
Which is the cattle.
Which is the cattle. Now, you can liquidate him within a fraction of a second. You don't do that with a farmer. If I have 2-3 hectares of land, you will need eternity to be able to go there and harvest whatever I have. Or you could take my 200 cows, do the rustling within a couple of an hour. They are gone. And that would mean total liquidation of that particular individual. So they are, whether in Africa, whether in Europe, whether in whatever, go study the culture of herdsmen. They usually are virulent set of persons, except that when organized, you are able to tame and domesticate this tendency towards virulence. So if you say the fellow said so, I work in a place, for example, for no just cause, or I get a feeling that my boss is out on every single whatever, he gives me a query. And an accumulation of this query, of course, will send me out. You will expect that somebody will tell you that don't think that your children will still be in school or there will be food on the table for your family when you send me out of job. So you call that a threat? It is the language you speak when there is a threat to the whole issue of survival. Why not providing a justificatory basis for all of this? We are simply saying that whatever it is that had been said, there are issues. We can't run away, we can't luxate ourselves from this reality. So if we identify these issues, it is only fair that we tame and domesticate our emotion and deal with the issues realistically. If you have a cough and your cough nerves me, and I tell you, you're disturbing me, you made it impossible for me to sleep the whole of that night, how does that stop you from coughing? Because it's an involuntary act. If I do not want your cough anymore, it's either that I relocate or begin to look for a way where I will assist you in solving the problem, because I too have become, as it were, a sufferer. Even when I'm not the primary sufferer, I suffer. So I should not antagonize you, because antagonism does not solve the problem. If anything, it brings about escalation. And so that basically is what we are confronted with. Whether an individual likes it or not, we are simply saying that how do we deal with these issues? How has issues of this kind been dealt with in other clients, where people have promoted patriotism? I may not like you, but I'll be injuring my sense of objectivity when you speak the truth and I say what you have said is false. Okay. Just because I don't like your face.
They say, okay, we're going to talk about truth. Some persons are now saying the truth can be relative in some circumstances. But let's talk about sincerity of purpose on the part of government. We've had governments, successive governments in this country, that had a question mark on their sincerity of purpose. How do we marry that with this situation in front of us right now?
Well, I think the issue we have to first of all ask ourselves is, who stands to lose the most? And if we are objective in that question, we will understand that this will create a win-win situation And if everybody keys into it, we will be able to at least reduce some of the conflict that has been recurring all the time.
Okay.
And these conflicts recur because they must happen. The animals that we are talking about that they bring and migrate with them, they have to feed. They have to feed somewhere. If you do not store them, provide the necessary infrastructure for them to live properly and stay in a place, they must move and find food. Who loses the most? The people are farmers, crops, loss of income, and then the value chain, the food value chain too, is threatened. So this is a win-win situation as far as I'm concerned. As to the sincerity of government, we can only hope that this is the best intention that they have. And the only reason we can, the only way we can test it is by actually implementing it. Fortunately, the land, like I said, does not belong to federal government. It belongs to the state government. They can always say, we are only giving out the land on XYZ conditions for XYZ period of time. Let us watch how this plays out. And fortunately, some states have agreed to work, some have disagreed. They can decide as it goes on. We find that this is workable, we can implement it here, and then it expands and the value chain increases. So I think it's a win-win situation.
Let's look at some groundwork that must be done going forward. I mean, some persons will talk about legal framework. You need to have some statutory provisions made for things like this, because there should be some long-term perspective to an issue like this one. Are we doing all of that, or we are in a hurry to have it done and then move to something else?
Fortunately, a lot of this has been implemented in other places.
Okay.
So we are not
within the country.
Well,
outside.
let's even say Obudu Cattle Ranch, for example.
Okay.
It is an ongoing commercial success. If we use that as the benchmark for the others,
right,
and then we can see how it goes from there. So we are not reinventing the wheel. We are only saying there is a point where we need to stop doing the same thing and expecting a different outcome. And this is something different. Let's try this and see if this works out. So if we domesticate these things, we domesticate the animal, we domesticate the cattlemen, and then we find that we know where they are supposed to be, and there's somebody that is not where he's supposed to be at a given time, then there is something wrong.
There's the Fulani element in this whole conversation, right? Every time you talk about herdsmen, the first thing that strikes a chord in people's heads generally is Fulani herdsmen.
Yes.
At some point, it's almost as if we are under the impression that the Fulani people are not Nigerians, or you don't have Nigerians who are Fulanis. Is it the Fulani aspect of this conversation that scares people, or the fact that herdsmen are naturally dangerous? Because some of us were still kids when you had a lot of herdsmen around and you didn't have crisis. So at what point do we have this fracture?
I think on the back of the Fulani herdsmen who are migratory themselves, you have bandits who use the opportunity of those people to rob.
Okay.
Because they are at desolate locations, you have travelers who are stranded in between built-up areas, and then there are soft targets. So, like the narrative that it's all Fulani herdsmen is entirely wrong. First of all, not all Fulanis are herdsmen. Not all Fulanis are into cattle rearing. There are other tribes who also are migratory and then, herd cattle. But the argument that it is Fulani is because they are the easiest target to blame. They will move from location to location. So after every crime is committed, if you are not able to identify who the culprits are, it becomes Fulani herdsmen who have already left. And we have become so complacent in our own blame. Even our security forces, they don't even work anymore. As soon as you say, oh, it's a Fulani herdsman, they just allow the whole thing to go.
And that raises the suspicion of, well, a collusion, really. Because people will say the security people understand how these things work and they know why they are letting them off.
Yes.
That's an argument also on the table.
Yes, but it is their responsibility to always bring the culprits in any crime to justice. So we cannot be letting them go off the hook all the time. There have been several instances where the cry has been made that it's Fulani herdsmen. Upon investigation and even asking some of the locals, they will tell you, no, this is either a cult-related issue, it's an age-long conflict between people who have been warring for time, or some other issues that are underlying. But as soon as people just hear, oh, it's something from the Fulani herdsmen, everybody just goes to sleep, and they assume that the crime cannot be solved. We cannot keep allowing that to happen. So, for example, if in Edo State we have a settlement, and we say this is where we expect all cattle, all herdsmen, and so on and so forth to be domiciled, and then we find somebody 150 kilometers away from that point, we know immediately that that person is up to no good, and he should be apprehended and made to answer questions.
Let me move to Nuruddin now. Most times you see pictures of some supposed herdsmen with AK-47 hanging over their shoulders, and then you're wondering, what's the correlation between being in possession, whether legal or illegal, of an AK-47 and being a herdsman? But that said, the governors now, whose states are saying, no, we're not interested in these projects being advanced by the federal government, what do they stand to lose, worst case scenario?
Everything, because their significance is derived from the sanctity of the unity of this country. And so the moment you find them playing a game that tends to accentuate the dichotomization of the Nigerian society, that becomes a serious problem. So if a Fulani man, for example, were in a position of authority in any state, and he says, okay, fine, the businesses that are doing well here are businesses that occupy space. No business operates in a vacuum.
Right.
Government says we want to take a risk, for example, he's a fine man, I'm not sure no government will do that. We want to use this land for some public whatever, and we are revoking the C of O. Do you know the dislocation, financial, emotional, psychological? So those who are saying no are just plain dirty politics. Because in the final analysis, these are individuals who would gain. If government, for example, says we will provide the fund to build a Ruga or a ranch in Edo State, they are not likely going to bring all the full sellers from Sokoto, Katsina, or Zamfara. Some persons will. It will mean that the value of the beef that we take will be enhanced. Because like us human beings, when these animals trek a distance, they dehydrate. It equally affects the quality of the meat that they have, the quality of the meat that is produced. So you find out that there is a value chain. But if you want to cut your nose just to spite your face, they become a serious problem. And I tell you, it becomes a sad thing. Let's take this example. When Obasanjo wanted to hand over in 1979, before then in 1978, they came up with OFN. OFN was Christian Operation Feed the Nation. But it was a facade. Because what in actuality it meant was Obasanjo Farms Nigeria. Why do we say this? Because using the Land Use Act, he had acquired enormous, vast acre of land. If you go to Ota today, close to 2/3 of Ota land is Obasanjo farm. 90% of what is produced is sent outside the shores of this country for him to earn foreign exchange. It doesn't bring back a backward-forward linkage. So when you find such people today, and again, do not forget that facilities were taken by this same man from First Bank to run this farm. It was Ade Oshun, the father of the ex-Prime Minister of Finance, as CEO of First Bank, who wrote off that debt as bad debt, because it was never serviced. And so today, if the other people were going to say, oh, this farm is an individual's farm, we want back our land, there was likely going to be crisis. But he was the one who said this was a Fulanization agenda. We say if it is a Fulanization agenda, the people who get decimated on a daily basis, who can't go to farm anymore in Zamfara, who are they? Those who can't go to farm in Katsina, who are they? So you find that they are being parsimonious with the truth. And they do this to a society that have been so nice to them. So we expected that today they drape themselves in the costume of statesmanship that will help to promote the unity. Even if we are cascading to the abyss of disintegration, there will be representatives, so to speak, of the centripetal forces. So when you find state governors who will say, we don't want this, you say, no problem. You don't want that. And the Fulani man, he's there making it impossible. How many people can still go to farm in Edo today? But if we must deal with these persons, in law they tell you it is a much better thing that 100 persons go free who are criminals than you punishing one innocent person. So how do you do the isolation? The man does his business. He says, I'm not the criminal. So we must provide. When you talk about the cattle business and all that, it's like everybody now says, oh, it is the prerogative of the Fulani. In Benin, we know so many people who are not Fulanis who own cattle. And sometimes, if you find a Fulani man leading this cattle, he's just working for these individuals. When we were growing up, 90% of those who were selling beef in Auchi, who were involved in the cattle, whatever, were Igbos. The Hausas were very insignificant. So we are saying that whether we like it or not, there will be ultimate benefit if we came together and said, let's do this. You talk about the AK-47. Do not forget that Nigeria has a porous border. Do not again forget that when Libya was vanquished, when Mali had its crisis, that we are increasingly becoming a global, not a global village square, if not much smaller than that. So influx of arms and people who had been displaced were trooping here. Again, do not again forget that the president, he has his shortcomings, I don't deny that, who had repeatedly said, we need to recharge the Lake Chad because it provided economic life for about 30 million persons. Governments for close to 3-4 decades closed their eyes because by 1960, it was already shrinking. Today, it's less than a quarter of what it used to be. What does that tell us? Dislocation, psychologically, economically, socially, or people who used to survive there, they must survive. When there was the Hurricane Katrina, you saw that there was no fundamental difference between us humans because people were breaking into stores. Because the line that separates sanity from insanity is malignantly tenuous. It is only when those factors that will trigger the insanity in you are kept in control that people become sane. So people will be normal when the situation or the environment encourages normalcy. So I think people should go beyond the issue of the politics of whether it is A or B and ask the question, what do we gain? If government, for example, has a ranch, it will mean that those who bring their cattle there will pay taxes. It increases. These Fulani cattle that are moving, is the, are you going to stop them on the highway to say pay your tax? It provides a way for you to regulate even the collection of revenue. It generates job. It does a whole lot of things. And it now makes it possible for us to identify those who are criminals. We're not saying you will not move. Under the vanish of, yes, I'm moving my cattle from whatever you are doing, recognizance. I stay in an area. Some couple of, precisely on Saturday morning, I stepped out to attend the meeting of people in that area. When I came back, my wife said, you didn't notice a cow that died in front of the house? I said, I didn't notice. He said, but there was a cow. My next neighbor had gone to trace the Fulani men who lead these cows around and said, one of your cows had died. They said, we are aware, but we have no need for it. People in the neighborhood, but not including me anyway, went there and had a free day. They were butchering the cattle, the cow. Now, the average Fulani man in the area where I stay, Ovia Northeast here, knows that area better than I do by virtue of what he does. And so the day he chooses to spring surprise, I'm gone. I can't ask him, what are you doing here? But if we had a ranch, for example, you can begin to interrogate. I've repeatedly seen this person. And these cattle they carry about are not even owned by them. They are not owned by Fulani man. So we must go beyond because we have people who are of different tribe. You come to Benin here, what you call the Ewara spear market or Welu spear market. Who are those who dominate it? They have a particular trade. And so if any one of them is said to be involved in crime and whatever, you can trace and say this fellow does it. I think that is the whole idea. How does that translate to you forming a settlement? Are you honestly saying there are no settlements in Benin already? You go to Aduwara, who are those who are settled there? So why are we playing the game of Nevri? Who are those? You call it the Hausa quarter. You call in Auchi, you have an area you call the Igbo quarter. You have an area you call the Hausa quarter. You go to the north, you have an area you call the Igbo quarter. You have the Yoruba quarters and all that. So why are we pretending let's isolate the criminals because they are victims. I was in a program in Sokoto some couple of years back. A relation of the Sultan, we got talking, and a friend of mine who is an Okene fellow, works in Port Harcourt, said, these fellows are becoming nuisance. We need to deal with them. He rose up in defense of the Fulanis because I didn't expect anything less because the Fulani are clannish. He did that. But in less than 2 weeks, he did that. We attended a program together in Abuja. I flew into Benin. He went by road because he came in his official car. He went by road back to Sokoto. That was a day that preceded the coronation of the monarch of Benin. By the time I got to my house, I got a phone call that he had been kidnapped. When he was finally released and we went to pay solidarity visit, he said, I was kidnapped by my brothers. They were not speaking Hausa, they were speaking the Fofode language, and asked that I should be leading them in prayer. They paid handsomely as ransom. So that state of denial, the reality caught up with him. So these are the issues that we need to isolate politics. When we were going to the polls in 2019, we were going to the polls. Haven't done all of that. We are home today facing reality. It's just like parents. A mother and a wife can quarrel. But when it comes to the welfare of the children, let them pigeonhole that quarrel. Let them put their arrogance somewhere and deal with the issue of the children in a way and manner that the children will say, we were honored to have had such parents.
Mm-hmm. Let me come to you quickly. This issue is, some persons have said, a burgeoning issue. Right? Yes. As a matter of fact, it has, on some level, exposed the frailties of Nigeria as a country and as a people. He made allusion, for example, to the Obasanjo issue of the OFN back in the day, and then it's now become more like the North versus the South kind of issue we're having in front of us right now. How are we going to deal with all of the other issues? Because in Pandora's box has been opened now one way or another.
Yes, but we have to keep on having these conversations. However unpleasant they are, however uncomfortable they are, right, the only way we can keep on making progress, and progress is incremental, is to keep on having these difficult discussions. But we have to believe that we are coming from a point of honesty and patriotism. We have to understand that there is no particular tribe that has the monopoly of either stupid or intelligent people, or well-meaning people, or well-behaved people. They are spread across the whole 36 states.
Right.
But we have to keep on having these difficult discussions. We need to highlight the truth. And as he rightly pointed out, let us play less of the dirty politics. At the end of the day, whether you like it or not, there are established settlements, there are established colonies, these things are in existence however you choose to look at it. So if we keep on shying away from the fact that they are already there and pretending as if these things are new, we are not going to go anywhere. The fact is, we have to have places where we can identify, places where we know we can go to find cows, find other animals that we need in good condition to be able to buy cheaply and affordably to even live our lives properly. And this is one of the ways that it's possible.
Well, let's look at the fact that we're hearing that the federal government is looking at 31,000 hectares of land from at least each of the 36 states of the federation. And a lot of persons are saying, give or take, that's about a local government. That again, it's a source for worry for many people, isn't it?
Yes, but let's look at it from a different point of view. Is it not better to have all the cows roaming around in one local government than to be roaming around the whole state in different directions, coming from different places and causing chaos and mayhem? And there has to be a certain standard that we have to agree on and say, if this is enough for here, it's enough for there. That's one side of the argument. The federal government has said, this is what we believe will be sufficient. But it is still up to the state to decide if that is what they are able to give out for the purpose of Ruga. If it is not sufficient for the state, they will reduce the requirement and tell the federal government, this is what we have that is available. There are many of those states, those are the bigger northern states, they can afford to give out that size. If you come to somewhere like Lagos State, for example, you are definitely not going to find it. But then the irony of it is that there's more consumption of that product in Lagos State
than any other state.
So how do you bridge these gaps? Somewhere along the line, 2-3 years down the line, maybe your state is going to say, we find it suitable, we'll give you XYZ land, and then see how it goes from there. So these are conversations we have to keep on having. We need to be truthful to one another, and we have to believe that it is in the better interest of the country.
Let me come to Nuruddin now. Last word, sir.
Well, you see, when you say 31 hectares, that's big land. I have repeatedly seen people, whether you take Ovia North as a condensed metaphor for the totality of the state, where people will say, we are the Omoton. All the parcels of land their ancestors had, they have been sold out. They don't own them anymore. They give them to people. So if you go to Ewomori, for example, over 80% of the houses there are not owned by those you refer to as natives or indigenous. So what land do they own anymore? So these are the issues. The point we are making is, do not let our hatred for a particular person or persons make us conclude about issues or projects that are good. I think government at state, national level, obviously have a responsibility to reconcile the minds of Nigeria. Nigeria got integrated in 1960, the amalgamation. We have not had an amalgamation of minds.
That was in 1914.
1914, we had independence in 1960. We have not, a century plus after, we have not had an amalgamation of mind. Our minds are still not circumcised. And until and unless we get there, this mistrust will deepen and will honestly continue to pay the price. But the hypocrisy is this. If we traveled outside the shores of this country, nobody remembers who is Hausa or Fulani. He's my brother, and we honestly live as if we were one. Those who play this game of ethnicity do not love the area they come from. I have had people who have taken hardline position on this issue. Some of them said they were militants. They were crashing an existence, eking out a miserable existence. Today, they own buildings across the globe that are worth hundreds of millions of naira. How did they make this money? By manipulating the same persons on whose behalf they said they had protested. And so the game continues. We must stop all of this mental slavery. And that explains why we are saying government must find the need to put more and more money in education so that we can have quality education. I think we have the problem we are because our education is bored.
Just like as Ahmed said a while ago, this is a conversation we must continue to have. We won't move any further than we already have right now. I'll be talking with two brilliant gentlemen, Ahmed Mahmoudou, a public affairs commentator, and Malam Nuruddin Asunoge Esquire, the lawyer, obviously, and an Islamic scholar. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming on the program.
Thank you.
We appreciate the value you've brought on the discussion this morning. That's where we tied up on the conversation.